Before we begin, make sure you're subscribed, because what you're about to hear has been investigated, documented, and whispered about for decades. Yet nearly every person who steps inside this place swears they left a piece of themselves behind. Like, comment, and hold your breath, because after this, you may never look at a school hallway the same way again. Most people assume America's haunted schools are just teenage myths, cheap dares whispered during sleepovers or made-up stories told by bored janitors. But St. Alden Public School in rural Pennsylvania is different. It's different because the stories didn't start with kids. They started with adults, police officers, teachers, inspectors, and a small team of state historical researchers who documented events they still refuse to publicly explain. The school was built in 1911, a sturdy brick building with narrow windows and dark hallways, meant to conserve heat during brutal winters. It served the community for nearly 60 years, until the state shut it down after a series of incidents no one ever officially linked together, though everyone living within 30 miles of the school believes they absolutely were. A silent agreement settled over the town. Whatever happened in St. Alden, it was better left sealed. But nothing stays sealed forever. It began in the early 1950s, when teachers started filing the same complaints. Objects moved on their own, doors shutting hard enough to rattle glass, and the constant feeling of being watched from doorways and stairwells that looked empty. These concerns were dismissed at first, but then students started reporting the same things. The sound of someone walking behind them when the hallway was empty, a shadow that moved across the far end of the cafeteria, and a faint tapping at classroom windows on the second floor, where no trees or ledges existed for anyone to stand. By 1965, the school board ordered a structural evaluation. Inspectors arrived with clipboards and left pale, tight-lipped, and unwilling to record half of what they saw. One inspector, who later changed professions entirely, swore he heard a child humming behind him in the boiler room. Another reported seeing an adult silhouette in a classroom that had been padlocked from the outside. Yet when police were called, they found no evidence of trespassing and no footprints in the dust that coated the floor. The official reports mention temperature inconsistencies, unreliable ventilation, and age-related structural issues. Unofficially, officers told locals to stay away from the school after dark. No one did. St. Alden became the place teenagers went to prove they were brave, the place older siblings threatened to lock younger ones inside, and the place the sheriff quietly patrolled even after it had been boarded up. The town treated it like a wound, still sensitive, even decades later. Everything might have remained a local secret, if not for a renovation plan announced in 2018. A historic restoration group wanted to convert St. Alden into a museum. They claimed the stories were exaggerated, a mix of small-town folklore and misremembered tales. They were wrong. The first team of restoration workers lasted only 4 days. They heard footsteps on the roof when no one was up there. They found their work tools moved across the building despite locking them in a storage room overnight. One worker quit after stepping into a classroom and hearing a chair slide across the far side of the room, even though every chair had been stacked and tied together with rope earlier that morning. A second crew insisted on installing cameras. That footage has never been released, but several people involved in the review process, 3 contractors and 1 archivist, refused to return to the building after watching it. One man reportedly stepped out of the review room, vomited in a trash can, and immediately drove home without collecting his paycheck. Rumors claim the footage showed shapes forming in the dark. Others say it captured a figure standing in room 213 for almost an hour without moving before disappearing the moment the lights were turned on. None of this has ever been officially confirmed, but the restoration project was canceled within a month, and St. Alden was sealed again under a new state order. That should have been the end of it. But last year, a small documentary team, 3 young filmmakers, decided to investigate the school without permission. They planned to record everything, compare it against historical records, and finally reveal the truth behind the building's reputation. They spent weeks gathering stories, preparing equipment, and mapping every floor. What they didn't expect was that the school wasn't waiting to be explored. It was waiting for someone to come back. And the moment they stepped through the doors, something inside the building woke up. The moment the three filmmakers, Liam, Marissa, and Jonah, pushed open the rusted side door of St. Alden, the air changed. It wasn't colder or warmer, it just felt aware, as if the empty halls had been holding their breath for decades and finally exhaled. Dust drifted through the flashlight beams like ash shaken from an invisible hand. The floors groaned, the walls ticked, and yet none of it sounded like an abandoned building settling. It sounded reactive, responsive. They set up their equipment in the front hallway, spreading out cameras, microphones, and battery packs across what used to be the reception desk. Liam, the lead filmmaker, checked his audio levels, while Marissa slowly filmed a panorama of the entrance. The lens caught old-class photos curled from moisture, broken trophy cases, and a blackboard still clinging to chalk ghosts of names written half a century earlier. Then something moved. Jonah, standing closest to the stairwell, jerked his flashlight toward the second floor. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. Marissa didn't lower her camera. Footsteps. They weren't random either. They were steady, slow, as if descending one stair at a time. But when they aimed all three lights toward the staircase, nothing was there, nothing visible anyway. Yet the footsteps continued, impossibly clear, until they reached the last step, and the sound stopped. The team exchanged a glance that said everything. We should leave. But Liam, driven by obsession or foolishness, lifted his chin. We came for real evidence. This is it. They pressed deeper. Room 213, the room from the unreleased renovation footage, sat halfway down the east hallway. The door was slightly open, something none of them expected because the school had been fully boarded when they arrived. Liam entered first, camera rolling. The room was empty, except for a single desk standing perfectly centered, its chair pulled out as if waiting. The dust patterns confirmed it had been moved recently. Marissa circled it slowly, filming every angle. That was when the temperature in the room dropped so sharply that all three could see their breath fog in front of them. Jonah backed away until his shoulder hit the wall. Something's in here. A small sound followed. A tap. Then another. Then a third. A rhythmic pattern like knuckles on wood. It came from under the desk. Liam crouched, breath trembling, and lifted his camera toward the dark space beneath. There was nothing there, but the tapping continued. Marissa grabbed his arm. "We're not alone. We need to go now." The moment she said it, every desk in the room, though there had only been one, shifted in their peripheral vision. Dozens of silhouettes filled the space, forming rows of desks that were not physically there. Transparent shapes, outlines of old metal legs and wooden tops, flickered like dying film projections. And in each desk, faint figures sat facing the front of the classroom. Dozens of them. Children. Fully still. Watching. None had eyes. Marissa stumbled back and nearly dropped her camera. Jonah cursed under his breath and pointed toward the doorway. "Move. Move." The three bolted into the hallway, but the building was no longer silent. Doors slammed one after another behind them, like a ripple of force chasing them down the hall. Lockers rattled violently, as if something inside them was fighting to get out. The overhead lights, long dead for decades, flickered on in a stuttering sequence that followed their sprint. "Left!" Liam shouted. They turned toward the West Hall, but as they rounded the corner, a shadow detached itself from the darkness at the end of the corridor. It stood completely still, tall and narrow, like someone watching from far away. Then it began to walk toward them with impossible precision, each step echoing a metallic click on the floor tiles. Jonah froze, breath shuddering, until Marissa dragged him by the sleeve. "Don't look at it. Liam, this way, storage room." They burst through a half-broken door and slammed it shut. The storage room was pitch black except for their flashlights trembling in their hands. The doorknob twisted once, twice, then stopped. But the footsteps didn't. They passed the door. Slow, deliberate, like the school was letting them hide for now. Marissa spoke first, voice cracking. "We need another exit." They found a small utility hatch near the back wall, leading to a crawl space that ran beneath the cafeteria. It was the only choice. Liam pushed it open and slid inside, motioning the others to follow. They crawled through the narrow, dusty passage, heartbeats hammering loud enough to feel against their ribs. Halfway through, Jonah's leg seized. He screamed. Something had grabbed his ankle. Marissa and Liam turned their flashlights toward him, and for a split second they saw it, small fingers, child-sized, pale and gray, reaching from the darkness behind him. They pulled Jonah, with everything they had. The fingers slipped away, vanishing like smoke, and the three burst from the crawlspace into the cafeteria. The exit door stood only 20 feet away. They didn't look back. They ran, flung the door open, and stumbled into the cold night air. The moment they crossed the threshold, the building fell silent again. No footsteps. No slamming doors. Nothing. They never released the footage. They never returned. And the state quietly reinforced the boards over the doors, just weeks later. But the townspeople say that for 3 nights after the filmmakers escaped, neighbors heard tapping from inside the school. Like knuckles on wood. Tap, tap, tap. As if taking attendance. The school had new names on its list. Only 3. But it never forgets.